I sort of go off the grid for football season, but that's like 20 straight weeks of grinding it out. Really in the off season for me, it's a lot of advocacy work as someone that has been impacted greatly by addiction and mental health. When I got to Rutgers, tragedy struck. And, that's when I lost both of my parents to prescription drug overdoses within 5 hours of each other. You get to a point where like you have to almost force yourself to kind of move past it. Like there's things you're never going to know, answers you're never going to get. Writing the book really forced me to dig deep. Even to this day, like when I take myself back to that moment, it's just like, it's gut-wrenching.
Well, nice treat for me today. I get to chat with someone who's got a wonderful personality. Her name is Lauren Sisler. She's with ESPN as a correspondent. She's also with AL.com. She is the expert on the SEC, everything football and beyond. Lauren, how are you today?
Doing good. I like the accent with my name, Lauren Sisler.
A little like, I love it. It's perfect. Because, growing up, or at least in my latter days, I was a DJ and I was DJ Sizzler.
Oh, of course.
So I like the more refined sound of Sizzler.
Well, it comes from that refined Queens, Brooklyn accent that I have. So,
and I love it. Yes. Being up north, because I dropped the y'alls, but I, went to school up north and have an affinity for my northern friends and have lots of lifelong friends up there that I'm grateful for.
Upschool North was at Rutgers, right?
Yes, at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. I was a little bit of an outcast, as soon as I opened my mouth when I landed on campus there, it was always like, oh, you're not from around here, are you?
Well, it took them a long time to figure that out, huh?
Yeah, about all of 2 seconds, but and you fully embraced it and loved every minute of it.
And where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. Uh-huh. And then we moved to the country. My parents had acquired some land. So we built a house out in the country and, went to a small little high school, small little church that, had about 15 people in it on a Sunday, so tiny little, just small town where everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody's business. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
And now you live in Birmingham?
Yep. Birmingham, Alabama.
Seems like a really nice community.
We love Birmingham. And I say we, my husband and I, and we have a 19-month-old Mason. And, I kind of pulled him from Virginia because he was living in Virginia. And then we had met when I was home visiting and knew nothing about Alabama. And in the world of TV, you get recruited, essentially. You send out your recruiting tape and hope that someone takes a chance on you. And I was very fortunate that the TV station, it was a CBS station here in Birmingham, actually took a chance on me and said, all right, we'll give her a whirl. And I was raw. I was young. I was a rookie. I had no idea what I was doing, but it worked out in my favor. And, it's crazy because little did I know at the time that it was going to become, the dynasty that was Alabama and Alabama football that Nick Saban,
brought about
from the bottom up. And so, being here during that time certainly, paid dividends. And then, we just love it here. It's a big enough city. You do get some traffic, but it's not like Atlanta where like you literally have traffic at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And how long ago is that CBS said, hey kid, let's give it a try?
So that was back in 2011. So what we're coming up on 14 years is when I made my way to Alabama and honestly never thought it'd be a place I'd call home. Because in TV, you jump around to different TV stations. And so you usually have a 2-3 year contract and then you're on to the next. And so it really just worked out well. And then of course, with the success that Alabama had, and of course Auburn on the other side had a lot of success as well, and the SEC was just growing, then ESPN was like, okay, well, we're going to create this network called SEC Network, and I just happened to be kind of in the footprint of that. And so it really helped my career in terms of getting to transition to SEC Network and of course ESPN.
What happened? I thought the SEC was going to rule football forever. In the last couple of years, not so much.
Well, there's that thing called NIL where, people can now, pay some money to bring in some good talent. And so I will say, you just see that the
the disparity that we used to see is not there. You're able to recruit players at a higher level. I think they definitely need to get some guardrails on it. I think that we've kind of seen that with just the recruiting, and it is a bit of a free agency with no cap kind of world that we're living in, which is a little different than the NFL, because in the NFL there is a cap. So, I think that, a lot of the leaders within programs, the coaches will speak on that and just, how things have changed significantly. But it is fun to see these players, get to thrive and put on a uniform maybe they never thought they would. And, we're seeing a different world out there in college football for sure.
I'd suspect, Lauren, that there are players who are making more money in college than they'll ever make in the rest of their life.
Oh my gosh, without a doubt. And that, the hope is with that, right? They're getting to cash in on their name, image, likeness. And, I think there are certainly some benefits to that. But to your point, these kids are going to see money that they've never seen in their lives. The hope is, and, by all accounts, just talking to different programs as I've, meandered throughout the country, there are programs in place for these kids and mentors and people that are helping them to be wise with that money. Because when you're 18, receiving a $100,000 paycheck, woo, like buckle up, baby. And, then you've got people that come out of the woodworks and people that, might try to convince you to spend your money where you maybe shouldn't. And so I think it's wise, because when you're 18 years old, your mind definitely works a whole lot different than as you get a little older and wiser. Me here at 40 years old has made plenty of mistakes along the way.
You're not 40 years old.
Yes, I am 40.
Wow. I guess you'll be retiring soon, huh?
I don't know about that. We'll see.
Tell me, football season's over. Super Bowl just passed. College football earlier than that by several weeks. What's your life like day to day now?
Yeah, so it's always kind of the $1 million question, because people are like, so what do you do after football season?
Sit around, do your nails.
Yes. Sit around, just hang out,
A 19-month-old takes care of himself now.
Exactly. Yes. Well, of course, being a mom and, I picked up a couple little hobbies, as I mentioned. So I went to Rutgers. I was a gymnast my whole life. And so there is no such thing as like professional gymnastics or a pickup game of gymnastics in the backyard, unfortunately. So we don't have that. But,
you go out and do a couple of tumbles. Come on.
I mean, if I'd stretched out real good, maybe, post baby, it's been a little bit more difficult, but, picked up some tennis. It's competitive. I love that. That's been fun. I like to get into a game situation, a set, a match where I'm out there, working hard. So that's been fun. But really in the off season for me, it's a lot of advocacy work. I do a lot of public speaking, podcasting, things like this, and really getting to go out and just spend time with people advocating, as someone that has been impacted greatly, by addiction and mental health and substance use disorders, as someone that has had family members pass away from it. As I'm sure we'll get into here, it's something that I'm passionate about. And so I love to get to go out, and really my message is owning your story. So it is owning your story, the good chapters and the bad, because I truly believe those chapters that challenge us are really the ones that shape us into who we are.
For sure. But during the season, your schedule must be crazy.
Oh, it was a grind. And I'll say having now 19-month-old, year one of football season, I went back to work 6 weeks after I had Mason, and, I get on the road, and here's kind of how the schedule works, right? So I get my game assignment on a Sunday, and then I'm on a plane Thursday to whatever venue, whatever, school we're going to, university. And then we're doing coaches meetings all day Friday. And then Saturday we're doing the game, and then get on a plane Sunday and come home. Well, year one with baby, he's 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks old. I was on the struggle bus for sure, but I would get on a plane, I would go do my thing. And it was challenging being away from him. He did travel with me some. Of course, when he's little like that, he can travel and just sit in your arms. Well, now he's, all over
Mobile.
The place, all energy, all the time, all boy. Oh my gosh, he is just wired. It was a little bit harder this season because as a mom, you're having to say goodbye to your child, 4 days out of the week. And it's even harder when you look at them and they wave goodbye and you just see this look in their eyes and you're just like, oh, and now they're starting to realize like mommy's gone, And so it was a little more challenging this year, but I hung in there.
Is FaceTime or Zoom, is that a help or a hurt? Maybe if you didn't see him, it wouldn't be as painful.
I will say, it's funny. So, technology these days, probably quite different than when you had children.
Well, it was easy because I just pulled a can and the string would get tight and I could hear fine.
You can hear it. That's good. You have the baby monitors. Well, now, of course, you have the ones that have the apps. So I can literally be in Arizona and on my phone watching him sleep, or, dad's putting him to bed and I get to watch him say his bedtime prayers and blessings and then go to bed and fall asleep. And it's just so cute. So, that's a little bit different, obviously, than, being able to do that. But it's bittersweet because you just kind of want to be there in that moment, like getting to put him to bed.
And in those 3 days when you're home, you're studying the teams you'll be covering the next week.
Yes. Lots of studying.
You watch a lot of tape.
A lot of tape, yeah. And for me, as the storyteller, the one that's going to be on the field, I'm really digging into some of the storylines.
And how do you do that? What are your tools that you use to say, there's an interesting angle on this right tackle, really interesting. Where are you getting your leads from? Where do you unearth those stories?
I think a lot of them come within the team. So, I will make phone calls early in the week to the sports information directors, the people that are literally on the ground every single day with this team. And they're watching them win, lose, or draw. And pulling those stories, because some stories obviously get told over and over again. So it's trying to find those stories, some that have been told, some that haven't, and really digging deep on those. So kind of leaning into that. And then, of course, there's just obviously, a plethora of information on the internet, but then just talking to people that do cover that particular team. Because here's the thing, Jim, I go cover a team and there's a likely chance that I won't see them the rest of the season. So I'll cover cover 2 teams, and then literally as soon as the game is over, my notepad, ripping all the notes out, tossing it in the trash, and rinse and repeat, and starting all over from scratch. So, that's probably the biggest difference in my job than if you had like a field reporter, a sideline reporter for a particular team.
They really get in depth.
Yep. Yeah, they know the team, well, and they're not having to learn it every single week. So, it is a lot of information.
How much do you try to interact with the media team that covers the team regularly? Do you get to interact with them?
Yeah. Just kind of reaching out to them. We do spend some time with them. And I will say a lot of times I kind of make friends with the radio folks on the field because the radio folks travel with that team every week. And so a lot of times, number one, they're former players. So they understand the dynamics of it at a deeper level. And then also too, we see so-and-so walk off the field hobbling off with an ankle injury. Well, the radio guy said, yeah, by the way, this is the same ankle that was nagging him last week. So you can just get a little more context and information typically from someone that covers the team regularly and has like the ins, and is buddy with the trainers, and buddy with the internal, personnel.
So every stadium you go to, the chant comes from the crowd. They want to see it. The sideline shimmy. Does it happen in every stadium?
Well, it is funny because I'll start dancing on the sidelines and then I'll look up and people in the stands are like either dancing with me or cheering me on, or waving at me and saying, oh, we love your sideline shimmy. It is funny because, it used to kind of be, oh, you're that sideline reporter or whatever, you're on TV. Now it's really 50-50. I'll be walking around like, somewhere and they're like, you're that dancing sideline reporter. So it's just kind of funny how that's kind of,
it's taken on a life of its own now, huh?
It has, it really has. And here's the thing for those listening, the sideline shimmy, actually, okay, I mentioned I was a former DJ. So I love music. I love dancing. And I'm kind of one of those, first one on the dance floor, last one to leave, and no liquid courage whatsoever. Don't drink, never have. It's just, I love music and I love the dance scene. But it's funny because I would literally, Jim, get so nervous before a game. I'd have like the microphone in my hand and I would just be like, like shaking, just so nervous. And then as soon as I would start talking and the game would kick off and things would go, like my nerves would settle, but it was always off the top. So I would literally just be like, so I started just dancing to kind of like move like that nervous energy through my body. And it really helped to calm my nerves. But here's what I didn't know. So in the stadium, I mean, there's always a plethora of cameras. You've got one in every end zone. You've got them up top. You've got like 2, 3 up in the top, 3 over there. Like they're everywhere. So, you kind of, you obviously they've got all the angles. And so what I didn't realize is that even pregame, before the game kicks off, they're always rolling. So you've got about 3 hours of footage that is just constantly recording. And so I used to just do these stupid little dances as I'm trying to loosen up and we're getting ready to rehearse our open and all that stuff. And I would just do these silly little dances, not realizing the cameras, even if the red tally light wasn't on, they're always rolling. And so a gal, El Habel, bless her, she sent me a video one day. I was at Boise. That's the first time I did it. So Boise, the blue turf. And I'm in a red jacket, which is funny. So I'm over there like dancing around and she said, I want to send you this. So apparently they in the control room had been recording me all along. And they were actually afraid to tell me that because they were afraid I was going to get so embarrassed. So little did they know, like it takes a lot to embarrass me, but the sideline shimmy really became a form of therapy. And so that's really become like a mantra for me and something that, I talk about falling in love with your story and helping people to find and own their sideline shimmy. So whatever that looks like for them. And so it's pretty cool.
We have a friend named is Dr. Chloe Carmichael. She's an eminent psychologist and psychotherapist, and she wrote a book about anxiety and using anxiety as a positive energy source. Use it as a gift. She calls it the gift of anxiety. And it sounds to me like you found your way to master that energy and use it to your benefit by controlling it, embracing it and then controlling it. So it sounds like the two of you would get along quite well.
Yes, yes.
So you're a gymnast at Rutgers. I would guess there are about 10 or 15 or 50 million young women who would love to follow in your career path. But you did. How did that interest develop for you in broadcasting? And how did you develop the skill sets and the nerve to say, yeah, it could be me that lightning strikes?
Well, it's interesting because I actually grew up wanting to be a sports doctor. Mostly because sports was always in my blood. It was like, our family loved watching sports. We were around and my brother played sports. And of course, I was a gymnast. And being that I had so many setbacks, so many challenges, gymnastics is a very difficult sport, very hard on the body.
Physically
like most
tough,
sports, but it's physically demanding. And I had a lot of setbacks. And so for me, I thought, well, wow, I could empathize with those athletes and help them get back out on the field of play, and whether it's a sports doctor, physical therapist, athletic trainer, or something along those lines is really what I was aiming for. And so it's wild because that was like my childhood dream. And I wanted that so badly. And was chasing after that. And then when I got to Rutgers, tragedy struck. And, that's when I lost both of my parents to prescription drug overdoses within 5 hours of each other. And really, Jim, it forced me to like take a step back, because I'll say this. I think a lot of times in life, we kind of have a dream for ourselves. And a lot of times we don't, when we get our backs against the wall or when things aren't going our direction or we're just not passionate about it anymore, we're fearful and we're afraid to kind of step out of that and say, you know what, like maybe this isn't for me anymore. And really for me, my grades were struggling. I was failing out of school. I was grieving the loss of both of my parents, and it made it really challenging to stay ahead. And of course on scholarship, like you've got to maintain a certain GPA or out. And so it really took me about a year of just kind of going through that career path, the pre-meds and the bios and chemistries and stuff like that to say, wait a sec, like this isn't for me. Not to mention I joke about this all the time. And nobody wants somebody with a 2.0 GPA operating on them. Not me.
I aspired
So
to a 2.0.
yeah. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I took a step back. And the funny part of it is so when my parents passed away, my aunt and uncle really took me under their wing. My auntie Linda, my mom's sister, and her husband, Mike. And he was an ER doctor for, 35, 40 years. And it's funny because I actually was going to tell them at Christmas time that I wanted to change majors. And I was like, kind of afraid to tell them because I guess I just
you made assumptions,
like I was afraid to tell them because I was like, I don't want to seem like a failure. I don't like they're going to be disappointed in me. And those were the things I was telling myself. And then I remember waiting until I actually got back to school and I called my uncle on the phone. I was like, hey, so I think I'm going to switch majors. I think I'm going to go into like broadcasting. And it's funny because his reaction immediately was like, he does the calculations. He's a realist. And he said, well, it would have been really, really hard and almost impossible to get your GPA back up for you to even get into med school. I think that's probably a wise decision,
And you just breathed a big sigh of relief.
I was just like, yes. I mean, and so it's funny because he's such a realist, but he did it in the most loving way. But it's just funny because, that was the encouragement. It was kind of like, okay, like that wasn't so hard. And so really that's actually how I got into sports broadcasting. Mostly one of my dear friends, Dawn Giel, she lives in New York City, works at CNBC there in Inglewood Cliffs, New Jersey. And she actually aspired to be a sports broadcaster. And she kind of told me, she said, hey, Laurie, I think you could be really good at this. Like maybe you should pursue sports broadcasting like me. And I said, okay. And so, I think it's just the, the relationships, the people, the energy. I love, I'm a performer, right? I love to perform. And so, as the gymnast that I was, like, that really, that really is kind of what drove me in that direction. And it's just been a lot of stepping stones. I mentioned to you, I landed here in Alabama in 2011. Well, it wasn't until I was actually, 2016 was when I actually made my first debut on SEC Network and ESPN. So, it took me a long time. I graduated in 2006. So it took me a decade to actually get to the ESPN level. And, I think a lot of times kids these days think, oh, well, I've already got all this experience. I have a podcast. I do this and that. And then they just want to magically show up on ESPN. But, it takes a lot of work, takes a grind.
I think there's a great lesson there in that 10 years from graduation to your first on-air experience. That's everyone would assume because you're so young that it was, easy peasy,
Yeah. I had to jump around to different TV stations. And then I was in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and my first, anchoring job, but like tiny little market, and then moved to Alabama. And it's just really those stepping stones and really what I needed to develop and grow and become who I am today, and still had a lot of maturing to do, but grateful for the opportunities and, just enjoying the journey, enjoying it, because I do think, Jim, a lot of times we, are always chasing that next thing, right? What's next? And sometimes you really got to, what the coaches all say, and now is kind of a mantra I live by, is be where your feet are. And so just trying to live in the moment and celebrate the victories in the moment and not try to chase that next thing and constantly looking ahead of you. Sometimes you just got to be right where you're at.
I love your message. I especially love your vocabulary. And you wrote a book called Shatterproof. And the message you said earlier on that during the off season is your chance to be an advocate. And I love the description of your journey from silence to advocacy and your honesty and the rawness of your reflection on your emotions and how you were feeling about your parents and how you lost them and what you lost them to is such a journey story. That silence to advocacy, you've already messaged it in terms of how it impacts your life today. And I'd like to hear that a little bit more about that journey. But you've referenced several times already, Laurie, the importance of faith in your life. And you said it was routine for you with your parents to go to the church with 15 people on a Sunday and how everyone knew everyone else and it was social. Was there always a deep-seated faith, or was it just rituals, and has it changed over the years?
Yeah, definitely a deep-seated faith. Church was part of our, it wasn't just an Easter Sunday kind of thing. We went to church regularly and really leaned into church and Sunday school. And, as I mentioned, we lived in Roanoke, Virginia, and went to a church there, a couple of different churches. And then when we moved out to the country, we started going to the church my dad grew up going to. And so, that was very deep rooted in our family, and our faith was very prominent. I tell people this, it was actually until the day that I left for college, my parents would come and tuck me in at night. We would say our prayers together. And so that, was very special and meaningful for me. But I will say too, my walk in faith has continued to grow significantly. Because when my parents passed away, I'll say this, I didn't stop believing in God, but there were some, moments of anger, just uncertainty, lots of questioning. And instead of leaning in, I felt myself kind of leaning out, kind of saying, well, I'm going to do this on my own. Like, I'm on my own. I feel lonely in this. So I'm just going to keep walking this road by myself. But in reality, I realized, God was carrying me all along. And, that was an important thing to recognize. And I would say I got plugged into Athletes in Action at Rutgers, which really started to help me in my faith as an athlete. And then, moving here to Alabama, we're in the Bible Belt, let's call it what it is. And for me, just getting plugged into the community here, into the church. I go to Church of the Highlands. They've got an amazing college here for ministry. My husband's actually gone to their evening program for like leadership training. And, I would say that it really has shaped who I am, because I feel like, when you walk through life, you're never promised tomorrow. And I've said this a few times, even just this week, is that God never promises to deliver us from hardships, but he promises to deliver us through hardships. And that's what I've started to realize, is that, like, I'm not exempt from life's challenges. I'm not exempt. Like, nobody said that just because we were a church going family that my parents weren't going to struggle with addiction and die from it. But what I've had to learn in that is, walking closer with him. And I will say, even with meeting my husband, when we met, he was a man of faith. I was a woman of faith, but we have grown exponentially with our walk. And it's really been just a beautiful journey. And, my hope is that I can continue to be, obviously a good steward of that, but also being able to, be a great parent to Mason and be able to raise him on the values that I truly believe will allow him to live, a good life with the Lord, at the forefront.
You got a crazy job from a schedule point of view. So you and John obviously have what seems from a distance to be a great relationship. And now you have a 19-month-old, which really eats up all of your time. And then you work where you're going to have teammates on your broadcast team who you see on a regular basis, but you're in a different city every weekend during season. How do you maintain gal relationships? Are they important to you? Do you have to work hard to maintain them? I'm guessing a lot of that's going to come through your church activity.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the relationships, it can be challenging just because I am on the road so much. But
yeah, while every other mom's getting together on Saturday morning at some local event, or getting together for dinner on a Friday or a Saturday night, you're in Boise.
Yes, exactly. Jumping on a plane. So I will say football season certainly is kind of the, I sort of go off the grid for football season. But I do try
is that 5 months?
4 months, September through December, essentially. Yeah. But that's like 20 straight weeks of grinding it out. So it's, I kind of disappear off the planet. And I will say, we do some small groups and stuff and had to take a break from that. It wasn't enough time to squeeze it all in. But, I will say that I do try, even in going to the gym or going to play tennis or whatever, creating these groups and making that effort. Because here's the thing I've also learned in life. If you just wait for everyone else to invite you to do something, like, forget about it. So I'm one of those that has really taken the initiative to, kind of circle around with the friends and the people that I haven't seen. Hey, I haven't seen, my friend Whitney in a month. Let me ping her and see if we can schedule lunch this week, in between her.
You're the organizer.
I'm the organizer. Yeah. I'm for sure the organizer. I'm the one that likes to organize and piece all that stuff together. Because I just like to have those things on the calendar and know like, hey, I love when you can meet up with friends and literally pick up where you left off. I'll say too, even my teammates, Dawn being one of them from Rutgers, her and my friend Kelly and Dawn's sister Dana, we're all getting together to go to the Turks and Caicos. I've never been before. I hear it's beautiful.
Indeed it is.
In April. Yeah. And so I'm really excited. I get all these hotel points because of all my travels. So I'm like, I booked a flight on points.
Let's
booked a
burn
hotel
some
on
points.
I know. And it's funny. The girls are like, well, let us reimburse you for the points. I'm like, no, that's the whole point. These are free points. Like, let's use them. So, it's making that effort because I do feel like, Jim, a lot of times in this society and this world we live in, and literally we were just talking about this because gone are the days where kids ride around the neighborhood and go knock on the door to say, hey, come out and play. Let's go ride our bikes. Like that's not how this society works anymore, right?
Sure
you're
isn't.
on cell phones, you're on tablets, you're, calling people, texting people, and it's just a different world that we live in. And so you have to, I do feel like with social media and stuff, you almost feel like, oh, well, I don't need to call that person because I see, their post about their kids every other day. But really you're losing some of that one-on-one communication.
But that communication helps, as you said before, you get together with someone for lunch, you haven't seen her in a month, 2 months, you pick up where you left off. I think sometimes it's because you're on a text chain with one another or you see them on Instagram. So there's a fake connectivity that becomes real when you're back together.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, there's obviously benefits to it all. But I do think effort is still important and key in all of this.
That's so important you say that, some people say, well, I haven't heard from them. Be the initiator, be the organizer.
Yeah. And I think too, then when a month goes by, people almost feel ashamed. Like, well, I haven't talked to this person in a month. I'm not even going to reach out. But no, be the one
that's when
that
it falls
reaches
apart.
out. Hey, yeah. And then it goes away. It evaporates because you're waiting for them to initiate something. And at the end of the day, if you're thinking about them, just ping them on a text. It's funny now, even with the cell phones, Apple finally added the feature where you could schedule a text. And so it's funny because sometimes I'll be, kind of turning in for the night. I'm like, oh man, thinking about this
I don't want to wake them.
Yeah. Saying a prayer for this person or something. I'm like, I need to reach out and see how they're doing. But I don't want to forget to do it in the morning. Yeah. So it's scheduling a text. So the next morning it'll ping them. And that's kind of a cool little feature. Yeah.
Great idea.
So just when you think about them, just pop them a text. Hey, been thinking about you. How's it going? Because even that little bit,
absolutely
makes such a world of difference.
Sure does.
Yeah.
And it can't be too corny. You can't be corny enough, rather. Because just saying, hey, I was just thinking about you. Just wanted to text you. That's fine.
Yep. Absolutely.
I had a chance last year to write a book. It took more than a year, but it took almost 3 with a terrific psychologist, a great teacher, Dr. George Everly from Johns Hopkins. And one of the things I really enjoyed learning about working with him was the impact shame has. And you've learned to overcome shame and manage it. And it's such a debilitating set of thoughts. And for a long time, you had such shame about the tragedy of your parents and how they passed. And now you say it comfortably, it seems, how they passed. But I gotta believe there's still a reservoir of pain, anger, and shame. How did you overcome that? How did you learn to manage that for your own mental health?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey because as I sit here, almost 22 years after they passed, as you mentioned, kind of that maybe a little bit more confidence because I used to shy away from talking to people about it, shy away from telling people the truth of what happened to my parents because I was so ashamed of it. Society tells us what addiction looks like and who it impacts, and
that's not us.
That's not us. Yeah. No, that my parents are educated, they're happy, they go to work every day. They're taking care of their kids, getting us to sporting events. Like my parents aren't addicts. There's no way. And so I think that was something I grappled with for a long time because I didn't want people to know that my parents died of prescription drug overdoses. And, they were going to a pain management doctor in Virginia and Roanoke there and getting prescription drugs to help them cope with their chronic pain. Mom had degenerative disc disease, dad had chronic back pain, as well as, PTSD from his service in the military. And I think that, they did a really good job of brushing it under the rug, hiding it from my brother and I and our family. So then when it did come to light after their passing, it, number one, was a complete shock. But then again, that shame that they felt transferred to me. And I'm over here like, well, I can't possibly like tell people this is what happened, So what I did is I just told this fabricated story for years because I didn't want people to know. I didn't want people to know because I felt like I had to keep up this facade and that people would think differently of me and my family if they knew that my parents died of addiction. And so that was really, really the foundation of it. And, being able to step through that shame and own it. Like I feel such a level of freedom now being able to own
That's what it seems like in reading through your book. That's what it looked like to me. It's so helpful to other people having those same kind of shame issues. And you shine a light on how the path to get through that might look like. Now, you get the horrible news about your mom. You're at Rutgers. You get on a plane to go home. You land, and your dad delivered the news to you on the phone about your mom, but he's not there to meet you at the airport.
Yeah. So, it was a chain of events that, even in writing the book, things that we had to uncover the timeline, not understanding kind of how everything pieced together. But, my dad called me, as you said, let me know my mom died. And it was just so shocking because I just talked to my parents.
How old was she?
On the phone, 45 years old.
My God.
And so when he called me, it was just like, I just talked to you guys on the phone. Everybody seemed fine. Like, what's going on here? It's the middle of the night. She's seemingly healthy. And I knew obviously she was dealing with some of the back pain, but like nothing that was like fatal. And again, I just knew, like, I obviously saw the pill bottles in the cabinet, but to me, it was always being taken as prescribed. Like nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A couple of times I look back and I say, well, dad always seemed really tired, but I didn't know that a side effect of an opioid medication is obviously drowsiness and that, he was falling asleep because he was medicated. And I didn't recognize that at the time, so I just thought he was tired because he commuted an hour to work each day. And, that's what happens when you get older, right? You get tired and you gotta take naps here and
older
there.
In his 40s.
Yeah. Well, my dad was 52. So mom was 45, 52. But, even back then they passed away when I was 18. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's not really young, but that's definitely not old. And now me being 40 years old, 5 years removed
you're still a kid.
Age, I feel like I'm still a kid. I'm like, I still have so much life left to live.
Indeed.
And so much to give to my son and my husband and my family. And I just, I can't imagine. Just so devastating and just the shock of that. And then to get home and think I'm going to have my dad there to just help pick up the pieces and to help us navigate this and to get through this. And then to find out that he too had passed away. And it was just total shock to the system. And even to this day, like when I take myself back to that moment, it's just like, it's gut wrenching.
How did you get back to school?
So, ended up going back to school 2 weeks after both my parents passed away. And really it was my auntie Linda, as I mentioned, my mom's sister, that was very kind of matter of fact. She said, Lauren, you got to go back to school. And I'm like, what? Like, how am I going back to school? Like this, there's no way. And she said, look, you've got a commitment to yourself, your university, your teammates. This is what your parents would want. So I knew that I had to,
thank God,
I really didn't have a choice.
Thank God you had them.
Absolutely. And they really were the glue that kind of kept things together, very loving and, didn't even blink. Here's the thing, like didn't even flinch when my parents passed away because I'm 18. So in theory, like I don't technically need a legal guardian, but I'm still a child. I didn't even know how to write a check. Like I'm clueless about the world. And I felt like they really just stepped in without even thinking twice about, well, what are we going to do with this 18-year-old teenager?
Mm-hmm.
And
how old was
really
your brother?
Just guided me.
Your brother,
my brother,
younger?
He's 2.5 years older than me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think that, and he was in the military. And so he was already kind of in his career and kind of doing work and deploying and going overseas. And so he was kind of in the midst of the start of his military career when all of this happened. And so, I went back to Rutgers and, I was so fortunate to have obviously the support of, my teammates and my family and everybody there.
Must have been a huge benefit for you then to have
Yes.
that
I mean,
camaraderie
and
that
I
comes from
truly
teamwork.
believe like our steps are mapped for us, because I think that had I gone, I really wanted to go to the Air Force Academy because I thought that was going to pay for med school. But like, had I have gotten into the Air Force Academy, my grades weren't good enough. My grades were good enough. My SATs weren't good enough. But had I've gotten into the Air Force Academy, I don't think I would have had the love and the support that I had by going to Rutgers. And I think that that's really became my saving grace and really, kept me above water and helped me to overcome this, debilitating tragedy that really could have taken me down and taken me in a totally different direction.
How cathartic was it to write the book?
Oh, so cathartic, because I'll tell you, number one, we started writing it at about 20 years, I guess, since their passing. And the process, because there's so much that I didn't know, because even, you get to a point where like you have to almost force yourself to kind of move past it. Like there's things you're never going to know, answers you're never going to get. So you kind of force yourself to move past it. And so writing the book really forced me to dig deep and really forced me to kind of formulate a timeline for things. And even that in and of itself was healing for me, just to know kind of a little bit more about what happened. And then just to meet people along the way that were able to fill in some of the gaps and help us to discern and disseminate, what really happened to both of my parents and sort of the chain and timeline of events that led them down that path. Because it didn't just happen overnight.
No. And did that process help you in formulating your message, your advocacy? So I know you're in such demand to speak to audiences, did that journey help you to galvanize your message or tailor your message?
Absolutely. And I think that's where things have, even shifted in the last couple of years, because sitting down to write that book, really, pushed me to really, I guess, obviously, like I said, dig deep, but to better understand, what had happened and really help me to shape my message. Because then all of a sudden, some of the things I didn't know and the revelations that I was having and being able to really key in on the important themes and messages, instead of kind of being scattered all over the place, I was able to really kind of niche down and know like, okay, these are the things that I really want to talk about and focus on.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of reactions do you get when you give a speech to a crowd? I would imagine particularly young women are just galvanized by your message.
Yeah.
I think young men are galvanized in one way and the young women in another.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because a lot of times I go into a group or an audience and, I kind of have an expectation of like how I'm going to be received. And it's funny because, 1 minute I'm like, walking into, I was at a women's brunch at a church this past weekend. And I mean, just incredible, just reception from everybody. And, just the connection was so real. But then it's crazy because then I'll go into, a landscapers event or, a construction, summit. And I'm like,
there's just big response, but different, right?
Yes. Yeah. But I also love too, I will say this, because I think women are more vulnerable naturally and more emotional.
And emotive.
Would you say?
And emotive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you kind of expect that reaction from women, but when you can go into an audience and afterwards get men to come up to you and cry, it's like, ooh, like, you kind of touched a chord and you hope that it's something they can use in a positive way.
On your journey, and it's always a journey, how important is it to you to, as you said earlier, be where your feet are is the term used. And we talk about enjoying the journey, living in the moment, understanding that if you're only focused on the goals are achieved or not achieved and only once in a while, but the journey is a long one. And if you don't learn to enjoy the journey, you're going to be wanting most of the time. Has that always been the way? Have you always had a positive attitude? Have you always been an optimist?
I've always been an optimist. I definitely am always glass half full kind of person. That has definitely been my mantra. But I will say, again, we talk about be where your feet are. The gratitude piece, I think, has been so much more ingrained in me versus always chasing that next thing or chasing that next achievement. It's like, wait a sec, let's be in this, enjoy this for a little while. Let's recognize like the hard work that I put into this or that we put into this, that this community put into this. and focus on that for a minute. And so, I will say, I think that just kind of going through what I've been through, it's just helped me to really empathize and know that, like, sometimes, like, your feet are planted exactly where they are. And instead of trying to chase that next dream or that next goal or that next paycheck or that next, whatever, sometimes you just have to find that moment of being content with where you're at right in this moment, and think about what led you to get there, and kind of sit in it versus trying to already, work your way out of it and find that next thing.
Prophesize with me, if you would, for a minute. 5 years from now, you'll be the age your mom passed. What's your life going to look like 5 years from now?
Woo! I don't know. It's interesting. I think for me, obviously, raising a young boy, in a perfect world, we'd like to maybe have one more and then call it quits. Hopefully it's just one more. We have twins that run in our family, so we'll see. But God's got a plan. But I will say, I see myself just continuing on this journey and continuing to grow and continuing to advocate and, maybe find more ways to be involved in this advocacy work and being part of the call to action. I think that's one thing I've challenged myself with, is leaning into the call to action, whatever that looks like, whether that's, working with different organizations to, continue, mitigating some of the risks that are associated with opioid use and overdose. Really just bringing attention and awareness to addiction, that this touches anybody and everybody. And, my parents are a statistic, and, I can boldly stand on stage and tell people, like, I never thought this was going to happen to me, and here I am. And so, recognizing that. And then just really meeting people where they're at. So, what does that look like? I'd love to kind of build up my, family foundation and maybe do some charity work through that and some fundraising. Through that, I'm still kind of working through what that looks like, how to kind of start one and get it off the ground and make it successful, and then, just being a parent and doing the best that I can with Mason, but just continuing to find purpose in the day to day and knowing, like, I'm passionate about this. So will ESPN still be part of the job description in 5 years? I don't know. I'd like
your world is certainly going through a lot of change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just, hey, take it day by day, but also recognize, I still got a lot of life and energy and love to give. And I hope that I can continue doing that.
Pretty soon, the Super Bowl audience, 127 million this week. Soon that audience is going to be big enough that you'll be on the sidelines for the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, you never know. I love covering college football. People have asked me, do you want to ever cover the NFL? And, I think there was a time in my life, we watched the NFL a lot. We were big Washington fans, but it's one of those things too. I always joke about, I say, like, on Saturdays I come home after a game on Sunday morning and, football's on all day Sundays. And I used to be part of like fantasy football leagues. And now I'm just like, nope, turn it off. I gotta give my brain a break, and so then, we'll have it on in the background, but I'm not as like entrenched in it like I used to be. And, spend time, playing with my son and, just trying to manage all that, and then all the chores and tasks that got to get done to rinse and repeat for the next week. So, it's a busy life. And, if you looked at my calendar, and I'm sure much like you, Jim, I know you stay busy, is like, woo, there's a lot on that calendar. And sometimes I've had to learn, I only have so much bandwidth. And I think, I did a retreat just last weekend, and, she basically looked at me, one of the gals that was part of this retreat, her name's Mindy. She was great. She literally looked at me and said, you fantasize about your bandwidth and capacity. Like, you think you can do all these things, and yet, like, no human being can do it. And, that's just how I am. I try to just empty the tank and then realize, like, wait a sec, I've got to have fuel in the tank for myself if I'm going to function and be able to keep going here. So, sometimes I just got to slow down and be where my feet are.
Are you really good at time management?
Gymnastics taught me a lot about time management. Where I've gotten myself in trouble again is the bandwidth piece of it and trying to cram too much into a day.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, I can do that. I can make that phone call. I can get from this side of town to that side of town with just 15 minutes. So I don't leave a lot of buffers. And I think that's where I get myself in trouble. So time management does become problematic because I do, once again, fantasize about how much time is actually in a day and how I can actually get it all done.
Got it. Lauren, lots of people are going to want to connect with you and learn about your availability for speaking engagements, wondering when you're going to start on the next book and stop sitting around wasting your time here.
Oh, yeah.
How can they connect with you?
Oh, well, you can ping me on all social media channels at Lauren Sisler. Give me a follow, slide into my DMs, say hello, share your story, let me know what you think. And of course, the book Shatterproof, you can get on Amazon. You can get on Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org. I have a website, laurensisler.com. You can go there, learn a little bit more if you have any interest in having me come speak to your organization. Give me a buzz, give me a ring. I've got a submission form there on my website. So I'm just appreciative of all you for listening and just joining in and celebrating with myself and with Jim.
Terrific. It's so nice to get to know you, to put a person with the story I've learned about and read about. Friend Alec McCauley.
Yes, I wanted to make sure we gave him a shout out.
He banged on my door. I had dinner with him last week, he and his wife, Jane, and he said, did you do it yet? I said, no, we had to reschedule. Oh, he says, you're going to love her. You're going to love her. I don't usually believe Alec. Now I believe Alec. Just kidding.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Well, shout out to Alec, and thanks for that connection, Alec. Appreciate it. And again, it was so wonderful connecting with you, Jim. I feel like we're fast friends as well, and I appreciate all that you do.
Now I know how all those fans on watching you on the sidelines feel. You do feel like fast friends, and I'm so happy you shared your time and your story with us. And I look forward to staying president of the local chapter of your fan club here.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Lauren.